Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the team selection for Gameweek 19. We have an extremely quick turnaround between the deadlines, but all the content has been posted on this channel. The transfer tips, best wildcard team, and this very team selection. Keep your eyes peeled for the deadline stream on the 29th of December as well, in the very early hours of the morning or afternoon, should we say. But basically 2 hours before the deadline, I'll be streaming for every FPL and Use Your Fantasy, Game Week and Match Day. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. If you enjoy my content, our aim is to get this to over 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 31,000 subscribers. Thank you very much for all your support throughout the entire year. I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, of course, going into 2025. We're going to try to build towards new goals across all social media platforms. The links can be found in the description below, and on Patreon, there's currently a 20% discount, so you can gain early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. But let's start off with my Gameweek 18 review before delving into my transfer plans for Gameweek 19. Arsenal are unbeaten in 11 games across all competitions, and in the Premier League that's 8 matches overall, with 5 wins and 3 draws, and they kept another clean sheet in that 1-0 win over Ipswich Town. There wasn't much inspiration in the attack, but a solid defensive performance, and David Raya didn't have to make a single save. That was the first time that Ipswich Town have failed to have a shot on target in a Premier League match this season, and that's another 6-pointer on the board for David Raya. He is right up there with the best goalkeepers in FPL, the others being Sells, Onana, Sanchez, and for me, the very best option is Jordan Pickford, but I think David Raya still offers good value at 5.5 million. It's extremely refreshing, to say the least, to finally get some points from Veltman, who was an awful signing for me. He got a random injury before the Southampton game and missed 4 consecutive matches, then made his return against West Ham where he got 1 point after being booked towards the very end of the first half, and here he got a clean sheet and 2 bonus points against Brentford in a goalless draw, and that's what he does have in his locker. When Brighton keep a clean sheet, Veltman has the possibility of getting 1 or 2 bonus points, which is very encouraging, but I still don't see him as a long-term solution for my squad. It was probably a mistake signing him, if I'm being completely honest, but at least he gave me something, and I decided to bench Robinson during the deadline stream, and to be fair, in my team selection, I was talking about my slight preference for Veltman because I thought Fulham would concede against Chelsea, and I also had 2 Chelsea attackers myself. So because of those reasons, I ended up going for Veltman in my starting 11, and that was by far the best decision I made all week. The captaincy we'll get onto very soon wasn't too bad, but my transfers ultimately didn't result in any points gained. If anything, I lost out on multiple points once again, but thankfully I got this decision spot on by starting the Dutchman. My other 2 defenders were still decent. Gabriel got a clean sheet but no bonus points, and he missed a huge chance to double Arsenal's lead, but you can really forgive him with all the goals he scored this season for the Gunners. He's probably their best player of the season so far, with the likes of Raya also in contention for that. But Arsenal are 6 points behind Liverpool and in a decent league position, but I think there's a lot of negativity surrounding the club right now. With Saka's injury, he had surgery and he's going to be out for several months. We could maybe see him return around March, but that's a massive blow for Arsenal. And in terms of their bench, they've got a lot of decent defenders and midfielders to come off, but no attackers whatsoever. Now, Sterling's injury might not be as bad as initially feared, but it's still not good enough, and Arsenal need to go into the market and sign 1 or 2 attackers at the very least. But defensively, Arsenal are looking strong, despite the injuries to Tomiyasu and Ben White. And my final defender was Levi Colwill, who got 4 points, and this easily could have been 12. He was on course to getting maximum bonus points after that assist for Cole Palmer and the clean sheet, but Fulham made a late comeback and got their first victory at Stamford Bridge in decades. That was a famous Boxing Day for Fulham fans, and Chelsea, that's a night to forget, but they're still in a very promising league position and they're surpassing all expectations, but in recent games, they have dropped multiple points against Everton and Fulham. To no one's surprise, it was the usual suspects in the midfield carrying my team. Mohamed Salah got another 9-pointer, and that's 10 consecutive game weeks with a return. He's simply sensational this season and really catapulting Liverpool to the top of the Premier League table. He's a man on a mission. Even if he leaves in the summer, which I still think he won't do, he's going to be a legend of Liverpool history and one of the best signings, and maybe even the best right winger in this Premier League era. But Salah is just so consistent. I think he's got more goal contributions than games played at Anfield, which probably doesn't surprise anybody, but it's still a staggering statistic, which goes to show why he's right up there with the best FPL assets in history. My second midfielder was Mbeumo, another blank, but I still have a slight preference for him over most options in this position, because you look at Jota and Diaz, they're going to be rotated from time to time, especially in the case of Jota. just coming back from an injury. You've also got Anthony Gordon, who might be the long-term solution with his consistency in recent weeks. Jeroboam has really difficult games on paper, but he's not a bad option. I just think Mbeumo might be a long-term hold for me with Saka's injury and the lack of options in this midfield. Maybe you go to budget options like Amad Diallo, Rodgers and Ismaila Sarr. Iwobi isn't too shabby, but I think Mbeumo is still one of the best midfielders in the game. In my opinion, he would be third or fourth in my midfield list in terms of available players, with Bruno Fernandes being suspended and Bukayo Saka's long-term injury. But unfortunately, I went for Bruno Fernandes as my Saka replacement for several reasons which I discussed in my deadline stream. With Bruno Fernandes, you kind of have that locked in 90 minutes every single week. He's on penalties, gets bonus points, and the long-term fixtures were certainly there. And when you're looking at consistent options in the midfield, apart from the obvious Salahs and Palmers of the world, I think Fernandes was probably next in line, if not afterwards, to kind of replace Saka and be a set and forget option. But it was a really bad decision in the end. If you look at the outcome, he got sent off against Wolves. That was his third red card of the season across all competitions. You could still make a case for holding him, but against Liverpool in Game Week 20, I think he's benchable in that fixture too. But immediately afterwards, you got fixtures like Southampton and Brighton at home, where Bruno Fernandes can get some massive returns, but he's been a big disappointment this season. His stats are always up there with the underlying numbers, but he can be very frustrating with those very deep positions, and also the lack of consistency that he shows, as well as Manchester United. But my final midfielder in Game Week 18 was Cole Palmer, who got 10 points despite the 2-1 loss against Fulham. He got maximum bonus points and got one more than Salah, but it's still a very close call, and in most weeks you would favour the Egyptian because Liverpool are showing that consistency, whilst Chelsea have suffered a few blips in recent times. But we can't forget, before the last two games, they had won 5 consecutive Premier League matches and they were showing better form than Liverpool and the rest of the division. But they've got a young team, they're going to show these inconsistencies from time to time, but Cole Palmer is churning out those goal contributions on a regular basis. In an ideal world, I would have sold Joao Pedro instead of Matheus Cunha, and I can hold my hands up and say it was a mistake, but there were several logical reasons why I decided to keep Joao Pedro. For one, he's significantly cheaper than Cunha, and that allows you to find your ideal Saka replacement, which in my case didn't turn out well at all, with Bruno Fernandes being an absolute flop in Game Week 18. But another key reason is the imminent ban to Matheus Cunha. Now, you could also argue just keep him until the ban is actually announced and then you sell him, and that's completely reasonable. But I wanted to get Bruno Fernandes to replace Saka, and I think that might have been kind of a domino effect. That was a bad decision, and that led to other factors like selling Cunha instead of Joao Pedro and losing out on 10 more points in the process. So I can certainly hold my hands up there, not to mention Bruno Fernandes getting -2 points due to the red card. And even if someone like Diaz, who didn't play at all, getting 0, that would have been much better, for example. But the other reason is Wolves have terrible fixtures, just like Brighton to be fair, but I would argue Wolves' are even worse. And there were also a few unknowns about Vitor Pereira. I know a manager bounce is always likely or possible when someone else comes in, but it's never a guarantee, and I ultimately don't think he'll work out in the long term with their manager, although he's doing a great job up until this point. And Joao Pedro was facing Brentford, who have the worst away record of the entire division, so I don't think it was a bad choice, or a terrible one at least, to keep Joao Pedro, but it's quite clear that Matheus Cunha is right up there with the best forwards in FPL, and Joao Pedro isn't. And if you're building a wildcard team and kind of forgetting about the ban, you'd probably go for Cunha, Jackson and Isak at this moment in time, and you might even want to take a cheeky punt on Ollie Watkins, with Duran being suspended for 2 Premier League games and 3 matches overall. But my second option was Isak, and I finally bought him in, and he finally did something whilst in my team, but it was at the expense of Matheus Cunha. I just had to find a way to bring the Swede in, and long term I think he'll outscore Cunha, assuming that he stays fit. But let's wait and see if he can do that, because his injury record is quite suspect in the last couple of years. But to complete this forward line, another disappointment for me was Nicholas Jackson, but I still have a lot of faith in him in the long term, and some Chelsea fans and even just observers would argue that he could be benched for Nkunku fairly soon, and you've got a fairly short turnaround between Game Weeks 19 and 20, but Chelsea still have a couple of days break around 4, and I think Jackson could start both Premier League matches, and I also think they lost a bit of control and lost a lot of the things that Jackson offers up front when they took him off for Nkunku, the only substitution they made in that London derby. But ultimately, it's quite clear that Isak is a level above, which I've said in my recent videos and streams, and Matheus Cunha on his current form will be the second best forward in FPL. With the -4 hit taken into account, I got 61 points for the game week and my rank actually dropped by 20,000 places, and I can thank Bruno Fernandes for that. If I'd bought anybody else, and that means 0 points or above, that would have been a green arrow for me, but it is what it is. It was my fault, and I might even rectify this as soon as Game Week 19. I don't think Bruno Fernandes is a must-sell necessarily because of the lack of options in the midfield, but the likes of Gordon and Ismail Assar are very tempting. Maybe a fully rested Luis Diaz, who should start against West Ham. There are certainly some options, but no particular standouts, which I have said for the last couple of weeks. If you don't have Palmer or Salah, I would definitely make it a priority to invest in those two. And maybe the best replacement for Saka wouldn't be a midfielder, but it would actually be investing that money in the forward line with the likes of Isak, or defensively with a Gabriel or Trent Alexander-Arnold, and you might have to be creative with your solutions. With only one free transfer, I'm not going to be able to roll yet again if I decide to make a transfer this week, and that's not an ideal position to be in, and I don't have anything left over in the bank, so I think Bruno Fernandes could be downgraded, and the extra funds can really help me to make other transfers in the defensive line and up front. Looking at Arsenal's upcoming fixtures, I don't think they're particularly great. You've got back-to-back away games against Brentford and Brighton, and I could see Arsenal conceding in at least one of those matches, and their away record this season hasn't been that solid, especially compared to the last campaign. To be fair, a lot of their victories and big results started coming in the second half of the season, but without Saka, the lack of creativity and the lack of options on the bench, I do see Arsenal struggling in a lot of the matches coming up. If they play the way they did against Ipswich Town, they're going to drop a lot of points during Saka's absence. But in terms of clean sheets and defensive returns, the likes of Raya will still be quite consistent in the grand scheme of things, and I still think Arsenal will keep the most clean sheets by the end of the season, so David Raya could retain the Golden Glove award, but it's not looking that good, and Brentford still have the best home record amongst all Premier League teams. Despite 8-pointer in Game Week 18, I'm not looking to start Veltman this time round. I just don't see a clean sheet against Aston Villa, and that's the main source of points, with most defenders of course, but especially in the case of Veltman, and he can get bonus points when that's the case, but I don't see that happening at Villa Park, whilst Fulham could keep one on paper against Bournemouth at home, but that's going to be a difficult game to call, and both teams should create chances in that match, but Robinson is one of the best chance creators of any left-back in the Premier League, so I don't mind starting him, but I will admit, if I'm building a free hit team this week, I don't think Robinson would necessarily make it, but he's still one of the best defenders in FPL. My second option would be Gabriel once again, and an Arsenal defensive double-up against Brentford, who score so many goals, especially at the GTEC Stadium, but I'm not that confident in the Arsenal defence this week, and the same goes for the upcoming Brighton fixture. It's more so a long-term play, and if I wanted to find money to invest in other positions, I could find a way to downgrade Raya, for example, and that could be my cash cow, but it's not ideal to make transfers in these positions, especially with your goalkeeper. So for the time being, I'll probably keep this Arsenal defensive double-up, but I think there will be a downturn in form with their clean sheet potential. And my final option is Levi Colwill facing Ipswich Town away. I think Ipswich can still score in this game and create a few chances, but Chelsea have actually the best away record in the Premier League this season, even better than Liverpool's, which is quite surprising. It's actually at Stamford Bridge where they have been more disappointing on a lot of occasions, and Chelsea have scored 1 goal in the last 2 Premier League games, but they're still one of the best creators and goal scorers of the country, and I think they'll score a lot of goals in this match. But is there going to be a clean sheet? I hope so, for the sake of Colwill and his FPL returns. There is no doubt in my mind that Mohamed Salah will stay in my FPL team for the rest of the season, and the only way I'd find myself investing in Haaland right now is if Salah gets injured. But facing West Ham next, a team decimated by injuries and suspensions, I think you need a great reason to go against him for the captaincy, and I could see myself permanent captaining him until the form dips dramatically, and things change very quickly in football. Let's cast our minds back to the first 5 game weeks of the season when people were suggesting that Diaz offers better value for money than Salah and Erling Haaland was unstoppable, but I just don't see Salah suffering the same downfall that Erling Haaland did ever since he told people to stay humble. My second midfielder could be my new transfer in, and that would be Anthony Gordon for Bruno Fernandes, facing Man United away next, and then it's Tottenham away. Not the easiest of games on paper, but Gordon has scored against both of them in the past, and his home versus away record is much more balanced this season compared to the last campaign where he was an FPL folk hero for me, and he was so consistent, really helping me get those green arrows on a consistent basis. But when I owned him in Game Week 1 in this campaign, he was very disappointing and frustrating. I'm hoping I don't suffer a repeat and the recent consistency he's showing suddenly just switches off and it goes back to being a useless FPL asset. And I think as long as he plays on the left wing, we should be good to go, and a double up in the Newcastle attack is certainly viable, and given their current form, you could easily triple up with Lewis Hall at the back. But my third midfielder would still be Bryan Mbeumo, and there is a clash because I've got a double up in the Arsenal defence, but the hope would be, just like I had in Game Week 18 with 2 Brighton players and Mbeumo, that one of them will give me a return. And if Brentford do score, I bloody hope that's going to be Mbeumo and not somebody else with Mbeumo blanking. But football can be a very funny game. And to complete things in this position, Cole Palmer, another essential player at the moment alongside Mohamed Salah. If you were to go against the Egyptian for the captaincy, I think Cole Palmer would be the best option in most game weeks, and Ipswich Town away would certainly be no exception. But when you're completing this midfield, I'd be looking at Anthony Gordon, Mbeumo, one of Jota or Diaz, and perhaps Ismaila Sarr, Rodgers. I don't really have a good feeling about the rest of the choices. Even Odegaard and Martinelli, I don't see Arsenal creating many chances or scoring many goals, and those players have been very inconsistent with their FPL output. So when you're looking for Saka replacements or even for Bruno Fernandes at this moment in time, we aren't really blessed with options right now with players you really can have so much confidence in to deliver week in, week out. The only two who really classify for that would be Salah and Palmer. He only cost 5.9 million, but I'm getting sick and tired of Joao Pedro. I've signed him twice this season and he's been an absolute flop on both occasions. The first time he got injured, and recently, one attack and return in the last 6, and it wasn't even a goal. So Joao Pedro needs to improve dramatically, otherwise he is on the chopping block. But I have said for several weeks now that once Brighton's fixtures turn for the worse, I can see Joao Pedro stepping up and Brighton getting more goals and victories in that time frame. They can be a very funny and inconsistent team, so Joao Pedro could be worth holding on to and starting in the next 2 fixtures against Aston Villa away and Arsenal at home. But if money was no issue and there was no talk about bans and stuff like that, Matheus Cunha would still be in my team 100% over Joao Pedro. And don't even discount the possibility of me taking a -4 hit once again, buying Ismaila Sarr instead of Anthony Gordon, and then Matheus Cunha for Joao Pedro, and just saying, you know what, I don't care about all the other factors, I just want the best players in each position, and I think Cunha certainly classifies for that at this moment in time. My other 2 strikers are also up there amongst the best forwards, and I think Isak is number 1, but Cunha is actually above him in the FPL goal scoring charts, and that might change very soon. But Isak has been in great form recently, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. The next 2 fixtures are ideal for an attacker, and Isak has great long-term fixtures. The stats are brilliant, and he's the best Newcastle asset by some distance. But Anthony Gordon's recent form with the goals and the assists would certainly enter him into that equation, and a Newcastle offensive double-up, whether Jacob Murphy or Gordon to partner Isak, I think is certainly viable right now. I wasn't keen on it recently, but I have changed my mind, and I was wrong about it. I think Isak is definitely a must-have up front, and then you could go for that really attacking duo from Newcastle. But let's complete this front line and my starting 11 with Nicholas Jackson. He just needs one more game to avoid a booking and a suspension. Hopefully he doesn't troll us here, but he's got a great fixture on his hands against Ipswich Town, and I think Chelsea could score 3 or 4 goals here, and the likes of Palmer and Jackson could be captaincy choices. But it's so difficult for me to go against Salah given his form and the way Liverpool are playing. But if you are feeling a bit different about that, let me know down in the comment section below. Perhaps for the first time this season, I could have a backup goalkeeper who will start in the upcoming game week, with Flecken being subbed off due to injury against Brighton and Valdimarsson was his replacement. And Thomas Frank said the following: on both Flecken and me, we have no real update. We'll know more tomorrow when we really assess them. Hopefully the injuries aren't too big. And he said this straight after the goalless draw against Brighton on Friday, the 27th of December. And we'll see if we get any updates on the Saturday. If that's the case, I'll keep you posted in the comment section of this video and also during the deadline stream on the Sunday. But the rest of my bench includes Semenyo, Veltman and Vandenberg, which isn't particularly great, but I've got 2 options there who can be subbed on just if they're needed. And ideally, I wouldn't have to call upon Veltman against Aston Villa away, but you can be pleasantly surprised in FPL. But more often than not, it will be shock horror and you're going to get a lot of pain in the process. But in terms of the captaincy, it's going to be the same thing every single week, I think. Mohamed Salah takes the armband and Palmer is my vice. But if I wanted to go a bit different, I would consider Isak or Jackson for the armband. But I think you need a great reason to go against Salah, given his form, the way Liverpool are playing, and also the opposition who are decimated by injuries. And several players like Thomas Soucek and Guido Rodriguez are suspended for that game. and they conceded 5 goals to Arsenal only a couple of weeks ago at home. So I think Liverpool could easily match that, or at least create multiple chances, and Salah getting another double-digit haul. But I do think there are opportunities to go against Salah in the coming weeks, and he will start blanking fairly soon. I promise you, it will happen eventually. But ultimately, it's a decent team. Anthony Gordon is my prime target to replace Bruno Fernandes in the midfield. I am considering keeping the Portuguese international, benching him against Liverpool in Gameweek 20, and then having him ready against Southampton at home. But I might just pull the plug and go for an Anthony Gordon or Ismaila Sarr, and that could even result in a -4 hit, going for Matheus Cunha again up front. Trust me, I'm prepared to take some very aggressive moves in the midfield and forward line, but some of them are just extremely risky, and Matheus Cunha will be banned very soon. It's just a matter of timing. And if you have any different thoughts on the captaincy or transfers, I'd be very interested to see what you have to think. I think having no Crystal Palace assets at all against Southampton at home isn't ideal, and if I was in a stronger position, I'd be looking to invest in Munoz at the back or Ismaila Sarr in the midfield, which I could still do, to be fair, by replacing Bruno Fernandes, so that's certainly on the agenda. Let's now head over to other websites like Drafthound and FPL Team to see what they're suggesting for my transfers. Check out the link in the description below for Drafthound and all my social media platforms. A lot of you have been signing up using my link over the past year, and I have to say it's one of the best resources in FPL. So they are suggesting Bruno Fernandes out for Luis Diaz, which might make sense if you look at FPL points. James Maddison would be another one, but the minutes is far too big of a risk for me. But from time to time, they'll produce massive returns, and I think Diaz could do that against West Ham away. Veltman to Howson is another suggestion from them. Robertson to Howson is also on the cards, and then Semenyo to Jacob Murphy, which is a very good shout actually, but I have to say, I don't see myself making that particular move right now, and despite Jacob Murphy's recent returns, I don't like the minutes concern you're always going to have with him. He does get subbed off around 60-70 minutes, so I could see myself just replacing Bruno Fernandes and going to virtually any midfielder at his price and below. It's just a question of who, because apart from Sarr and Gordon, who are quite tempting to me, I'm not a big fan of the rest. If Diaz or Jota were nailed on and there were some injuries in that Liverpool attack, then they would be my kind of go-to option, no hesitation, but that isn't the case. Everyone's available, and I think all of them will share minutes. Gakpo has started the last 6 or 7 Premier League matches, but he's a forward in this game, and I don't want to invest in him over Jackson, Isak. I think anybody will be better than Joao Pedro, but in that case, I'd just rather go for Cunha or Chris Wood. So there's a lot of things to do with this setup, and let's look at the player rankings, and I'm going to show you how intuitive and easy it is to use this website. So Anthony Gordon being subbed in, and I've basically just gone to the player rankings section, which is my favorite tool, and I've also put the filter of midfielders. So Gordon in for Bruno Fernandes, and let's click this green icon on the right hand side. So Semenyo and Robertson will be subbed on, and then I've got Joao Pedro, Veltman and Van den Berg on the bench. Salah captain and Palmer vice. So Drafthound and I are in agreement on the captaincy, but they have put Semenyo in for Joao Pedro, which I certainly don't blame them for. I think Joao Pedro has been a useless FPL asset over the last month. Hopefully that changes whilst he's on my FPL team, but no guarantees can be really made there with his recent form. But that is what Drafthound are recommending. Let me know your thoughts down the comment section below. Have you used Drafthound before? And now finally, to conclude things, I want to show you a sneak preview of Gameweek 20. Websites like FPL Team are very important because you can visualize future game weeks, which you can't do in the FPL website just yet. And I am considering Valdimarsson over Raya if Flecken is still out injured because of the difference in fixtures, and I've also got Gabriel already in place for the Arsenal defensive coverage, but of course that's kind of like a really risky play and there might not be much upside to it because we are talking about goalkeepers after all, but you can be surprised about the massive swings you can experience even from that position in Fantasy Premier League. But Colwill, Gabriel and Robinson remains a decent defensive line for Gameweek 20, but I think in the future I still need to make some adjustments and upgrade on Veltman and Van den Berg. My midfield could be Palmer, Mbeumo, Salah, Gordon and Semenyo with Jackson and Isak up front, and then Joao Pedro could be benched here, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he blanked against Aston Villa and then people sell him and he hauls against Arsenal. That's the kind of patterns we've seen from Joao Pedro and Brighton in the past, and it's also typical of FPL when you sell a player who has been showing a lack of form for a long period of time and they finally deliver when you least expect them to. But that is what I'm looking at for Gameweek 20, assuming I buy Anthony Gordon this week, but that isn't set in stone. I'm still considering Ismaila Sarr, and if I go for somebody cheaper than Gordon, which includes the Crystal Palace winger, I could even take a -4 hit and upgrade Joao Pedro to Chris Wood or Mateus Cunha again, which would be stupid maybe, but at the same time, you'll probably get a lot of FPL points against the likes of Tottenham coming up next. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Our aim is to get this to 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 31,000 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on X or Twitter as well as Instagram, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. And there's currently a 20% discount on Patreon. Also join the Discord server, FPL League, check out Drafthound as well as Spotify. And I'm also on Blue Sky and Reddit, so just type in FPL Dylan or Dylan RCM across all social media platforms and you'll probably find me. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 19 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.